Well, hello and welcome to Conveyor Pod. My name's Lisa Brindle, Head of Learning at Conveyor, and I'm absolutely delighted to be your host for today. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking all about neurodiversity. So, during today's session, we're going to be sharing with you some insight into the needs of neurodivergent employees and customers and talking about the impact that this has on the insurance industry. So I'm joined today by some fabulous guests. So with me today is Catherine Masters, our Director of Pricing. We also have Vic Mazanis. So Vic is the General Manager from Gain. Thank you. And our very own Tom Hepworth, who is our Research and Insight Manager. Okay, so let's kickstart today's session then. And for my first question, I'm going to direct that to Vic initially. So, Vic, can you tell us a little bit about what is neurodiversity and tell us a little bit about how people and how many people are affected by this?
Yeah, of course. Happy to do so. So, neurodiversity is basically people whose minds operate in a different way to what we expect as the standardized norm. There's no such thing as a normal person. We all have our own unique differences, but some of us can be marginalized by those differences because society isn't built to fit the way our minds work. This is a really broad swathe of people. It can include people like myself who are autistic, people who have ADHD. It can include things like OCD. It can include dyspraxia, Tourette's, and a whole range of different ways of having a different kind of mind. Neurodiversity is a way of looking at this that says that there's no wrong way to have a mind, and it's simply a matter of understanding our unique strengths and our unique differences and how to support each other. It's also a very common thing. I believe the current figures, we believe that about 1 in 6 people across the UK are neurodivergent in some form or another.
Thank you, Vic. Okay, so Catherine, Tom, do you have anything that you want to add to this? I know for me, this is something that is more and more highlighted these days and is very comforting. I myself have people in my family that have been diagnosed as being dyslexic, and I myself demonstrate some dyslexic tendencies, so I know what Vic has just shared. Catherine, Tom, do you have anything that you want to add to this?
Just that 1 in 6 is a startling statistic and just goes to show the importance of us having these types of conversations. This is something that will affect a large part of people's lives, the colleagues that we have at Covea, and the broader set of partners that we work with. So being able to have a conversation about something that affects 1 in 6 people is a fantastic place to be. I'm looking forward to us getting into the discussions.
Exactly that, and I think our research suggested I suppose it was more common in younger generations. I think we saw 18 to 34, it was higher than that, it was maybe 1 in 5. And I think that's driven by an openness among those younger generations, supposed to talk about it more and get those diagnoses that I think were harder to get back 20, 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Thank you. So there's a lot of terminology that comes along with neurodiversity, and you've talked a little bit about that, Vic. Can you expand on, what exactly is meant by some of these terms?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a really important thing to ask as well, because I do think there are a lot of stereotypes and misunderstandings that we deal with. A lot of people come to this with a lot of misconceptions. As Tom was saying, diagnosis is becoming more accessible and younger generations are talking about it more. But I know for myself, when I was a child growing up, the idea that I might be autistic was never even considered because people like me were not really considered in the set of people who even got sent for diagnosis or sent for support. And that does mean that there are a lot of stereotypes and misunderstandings. So because neurodiversity is such a broad sphere, there are a lot of differences between different kinds of neurodiversity as well as between neurodivergent individuals. There's a statement that we say, which is when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And it's very accurate and it kind of holds true for all of these. To give you an example, some autistic people may be closer to the stereotype. Some of us may struggle with certain things like sensory processing issues. I have some of those myself. We might have differences in the way we communicate socially, in our social needs, in the way we experience the environment, in things like anxiety. We we can also have a lot of incredible strengths that people don't realize. For example, autistic people in particular have very high rates of personal senses of morality and duty and a sense of right and wrong, and can feel very strongly about justice and things like that. And that can make it very difficult for us to deal with what we can perceive as dishonesty when actually it's more about social nuance. Similar things to think about are people who have ADHD. There's often a misconception that that's somebody who's unable to focus, who's scatterbrained, who doesn't, can't do certain things. But actually, people who have ADHD can be incredibly driven and passionate people and can have something called hyperfocus, where when something matches that person's passions in the moment, they can dive into the information on that topic in a way that is very difficult for other people to do. Across the range of neurodiversity, you'll see that when you look at things such as dyslexia, a lot of people, I think of dyslexia as just a difficulty with reading and writing. But dyslexic people are actually incredible, on average, at big picture thinking, at seeing the wider sphere of what's going on, of visual processing. There's a lot of incredible potential there. So what we think about when we talk about the terminology of neurodiversity is realizing that each individual person has incredible strengths and value to offer, and that it's about understanding that individual person and shaping their environment and the supports and things to their needs, while understanding as well that they're a whole person who has a whole universe of capability, much of which, we haven't even scratched the surface on. We're still discovering things about differences in processing of information, in differences in language communication that are showing not deficits, but different kinds of strengths and different approaches. It's a really exciting field that I could info dump on for about 30 minutes, and I don't think we have time.
Well, Vic, thank you so much for that. What I absolutely love about what you've just shared is it's about changing how people are thinking around this and seeing that actually there are lots and lots of strengths that can come from this, and it's about tapping into those hyper focus, those different strengths that people have got, which is amazing. Catherine, Tom, is there anything that you would like to add at this point?
Yeah, I think it's, we talk about diversity. Diversity is a phrase that will be quite commonplace in workplaces, in the kind of social context. But I think what's really interesting hearing Vic speak is just deep diving on that neurodiversity. So it's well established that having diversity in your organization leads to a more successful and more well-rounded set of colleagues. But I think just us focusing today on neurodiversity just shows that the strengths that people whose brain doesn't fit that typical way of working is a real strength of an organization. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later on about what we've been doing at Covéa to support both our customers and our colleagues. But it's fantastic to hear Vic articulate just the impact of if and when we're successful with that, the impact that those individuals can have on how we work, the way we work, and ultimately the success of an organization like Covéa.
Exactly that. And when speaking to some of our neurodivergent colleagues, I mean, one of the first things we heard was the first time they'd heard of certain conditions was being diagnosed with it. And some of the, I suppose, historic media portrayals of people with different neurodivergences were Rain Man, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. And it's always that negative stigma attached. What we're seeing more and more is that, I suppose, that openness to talk about it, but also the positive sides of it, like Vic and Catherine have just mentioned. So there's a lot more support available than there were, and there's a lot, I suppose, positive role models than there were previously.
So a lot of what we've talked about is that we've talked about getting, how we can use this and get the best out of people. But Tom, if I could come to you next, what support can businesses offer to neurodivergent customers? So if we look at it through a customer's lens now, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. So it's worth saying, like Vic mentioned beforehand, no two people are the same, whether they've got autism, ADHD, whatever. So one consistent form of support just doesn't work. And it's also particularly difficult to identify neurodivergences unless that customer tells you about them. An example we found from recent research was that 1 in 5 SMEs, so small and medium business owners, said they were neurodivergent. And I'm sure speaking to different brokers and I suppose different insurers, that number seems really, really high. But it fell in line with industry benchmarking, and it shows they've got the higher requirement for additional support, so 40% compared to the industry average of 22%. Like we said, we spoke to many neurodivergent consumers. And we spoke about, I suppose, the different ways in which businesses can support them. And the feedback we got was we've kind of had these conditions for 20, 30 years. We've got coping mechanisms in place. A few of them alluded to having friends or family guide them through things like insurance interactions, and others showed that resistance to phone interactions. So it's having that wide variation of channels available because people have different preferences, and also acknowledging that maybe tailored support, so adding family members or friends to support them with that or take ownership of different interactions, maybe what's going to benefit them from them. We also found that neurodivergent individuals were slightly more likely to pursue riskier choices when they were financially stretched. And we know we're currently going through a cost of living crisis. So they were 4 times more likely to use a loan shark compared to those that weren't neurodivergent, and twice as likely to just not make essential payments when they were short on money. And we realised that, I suppose, opening those channels of conversation and potentially highlighting the different support mechanisms you've got may make that a much lower number than what we've been cited there.
Thank you, Tom, as always, for bringing that research and insight into the conversation. Catherine, can you tell us a little bit about what have we specifically done at Conveyor to help with this?
Absolutely. It's probably worth mentioning in the first instance that we have an accessibility work stream. So we have a group of colleagues who are focused on thinking about researching some of the areas that we've touched on today, but in particular to support neurodivergent people, we've been looking at adapting our processes wherever possible to support the requirements of that specific individual. Because as Tom and Vic have both said, there's not just one type, one way that people will need support. So we have looked to adapt our processes and really curate them for the individuals. So that could mean varying the channel of contact that we use, or printing something on a different piece of colour of paper in order to help somebody consume the documents that we're providing. We also look at consistently testing what we're doing, because there's no point in just doing something once and then not understanding whether it's had the impact that it has or that we intended to. So testing and then adapting particularly our customer communications is a key part of our work in this space. And it's also really important that the policy documents we provide to customers can be well understood and easily understood, because it's important that our customers have a clear understanding of the insurance that they are contracting with us on. And then just lastly, providing training to help increase awareness of neurodivergences across our business. And that can help people in identifying and supporting both customers, brokers, and just in their day-to-day lives as well. So it is a kind of continuous and iterative approach that we take to ensure that we continue to deliver the best service.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine. So lots of research undertaken, lots of things that we're doing already. Tom, can I come back to you now? We have already talked about employees a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about supporting neurodivergent employees, please?
Yeah, of course. So employers are starting to recognise neurodivergences a lot more and starting to adapt processes. However, I suppose the formal processes probably aren't in place across a lot of HR departments, and it's finding what best works for that individual. So when we're speaking to some of our neurodivergent people, they kind of highlight that themselves are almost unaware initially what may help them. And it's a case of trial and error, and that employer almost being adaptable and accepting that some things may be tried after 2 or 3 months, scrapped to a different area or a different focus tried. One of the key things that came through when speaking to a lot of neurodivergent individuals, and to be fair, those that aren't neurodivergent too, is the recruitment process making, as well as individuals, anxious. So an example that someone pointed out within one of our focus groups was a typical job interview question that I'm sure everyone on this call's heard before. It's tell me why you want this job. or why this company appeals to you. A lot of us know that's a bit of a cue to talk about the role or the business or kind of what they're really looking forward to. But actually, some of those with neurodivergent conditions are a lot more theoretical than practical, and may start going into the basics of wanting to be paid, knowing this next step in the career, and not answering the question in that the societal norm sort of way. We also found that, I suppose, across the entire of the UK, but particularly within neurodivergent individuals, learning styles differ massively. So it's not a case of, okay, you've got ADHD, we'll do all your learning this way. It's still about catering and not having that one-size-fits-all approach, because it just doesn't work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. So Tom's talked quite a lot there about some of the adjustments. Catherine, is there anything else that Tom's not mentioned that we've specifically done at Conveyor to support this?
Yeah, so Tom mentioned a little bit there about the recruiting process, and this is an area that we've been looking to amend and to better capture requirements during recruitment stages so that we can make any adjustments necessary. Even something as simple as virtually introducing hiring managers ahead of an interview to help people who may have neurodivergent diagnoses to help them put them at ease and to give them the best chance at showing themselves to their best ability in that recruitment process. That also helps us to continue to amend and improve our internal learning processes for colleagues who, once they've gone through that recruitment process, then experience the training and learning that we have available to us here. And lastly, I've mentioned it before, but training to increase awareness to help people recognise and feel confident to say, I need a little bit of help here. Could you make an adjustment here? As well as us proactively looking at ways to do so is important for us to help support neurodivergent colleagues pre-hire and then post-hire as well.
Again, lots and lots going on in the space. Vic, I've saved my last question for you, if that's okay, if I can come back to you at this point. So what do you see across the insurance industry when it comes to neurodivergence?
Honestly, we're seeing quite a lot of really interesting data coming out of this. One of the advantages of the way we've been working with our corporate members like Conveyor and like some other companies is because you are so driven to do the work that you're doing and the kinds of different ways you're approaching this, we're getting to see some of the different things that are helping people. I have to say, I really love, for example, the fact that all of your approaches are building around flexibility rather than a single solution. It's very much the kind of thing we want to see. As I said, because there's such diversity within neurodiversity, really the best way you can support all your employees and all of your customers, regardless of neurodivergence, is by thinking about these universal design principles. What can we do to create multiple solutions to fit whatever a person's needs are? What can we do to give people the freedom to say that they'd like to trial something and then see what works for them? Some very common roadblocks we see in the industry that can make it more difficult for neurodivergent people to thrive in the workplace and can make it more difficult for companies to support them effectively is anxiety around disclosure, for example. Some specific things we've seen is that people are worried that disclosing their neurodivergence will affect their chance at promotions or might result in exclusion socially in the workplace. They're worried that people will assume their work needs more support than it actually does. There'll be stereotyping, or that people won't believe them when they say it. So the kind of training that you're putting in to help people understand the fact that this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, how diverse the community is, giving those line managers that training and support so they feel confident in approaching a colleague and giving them that support and they know what they can offer. That all makes a big difference in making sure those early conversations are positive ones. I think that when a neurodivergent person does come forward and disclose they have a need, that is a supreme act of trust they're giving, in that they're saying, I am anxious about talking about this, but I have faith in you and in the organisation I work for that we can come to a solution and we can come to something where we all get what we need. And being able to receive that communication in that good faith and recognise what a wonderful opportunity you're being handed is so important. And that goes for customers as well. Some of the other things we see in the industry as barriers are around the fact that because line managers are such an important part of a person's experience in the workplace, line managers, hiring managers, that recruitment process, and then your onboarding and your day-to-day life in the role. So the fact that you are putting in things like opportunities for people to get that early introduction before the main interview to lower that anxiety, the fact that you're putting that focus on upskilling the people who are going to be the first port of call and the primary source of support for someone through a lot of their working career, that's all really positive. Other things that we've seen are really effective are about creating this community where people can feel safe to disclose, can feel safe to come forward. It's really important for leadership to really get involved. As you've all said, we know that younger generations are more likely to disclose and say that they're neurodivergent than older ones. And part of that is because, as you say, there's been barriers to diagnosis and recognition of it. Many older generations were never even told that they could consider themselves as this thing. And what that does mean as well is that we're seeing a lot of people working in the industry now who in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s are realizing for the first time, because one of their children or grandchildren has sought diagnosis, or a co-worker or a colleague has sought diagnosis, and are seeing those same patterns in themselves. And it's really important that we empower those people, many of whom will be in leadership positions, to be open about their own journeys, because that creates an incredible amount of trust amongst the rest of the people in your company. The fact that you're having these conversations in the first place, things like this podcast, these are all really important steps on helping people understand that no company is perfect at this yet. No one has it all figured out. We're all still trying to find the right solutions that can help each other. But by having these conversations and creating spaces where people can communicate, where they can learn, where they can ask even really clumsy questions, that all makes a huge difference. Some things we've seen across the industry is a very heavy drive towards trying to make sure that we're putting security in at every level. So that's thinking about those adjustments. It's thinking about lowering barriers to entry for things. A lot of these can be really simple things. For any line managers listening to this, for example, a really simple example I give, if you want to support your neurodivergent employees, make a habit of, if you're going to be having a meeting, sending the meeting agenda out a couple of days in advance with not just the bullet points of what's going to be discussed, but a note next to who is going to be responsible for each speaking piece. If that person needs to bring any papers or particular piece of information along, and the purpose of covering that in the discussion. I know for myself, for example, if I'm told to come to a meeting and talk about a topic and all I have is the title, I'll prepare all the things I find most interesting about that topic. And that's not necessarily what anyone actually needs to get through. Whereas if I know that the purpose of that conversation is to develop an action plan for something, then I will be able to tailor the information I bring. Now, that's a really good way of supporting your neurodivergent colleagues, but actually it makes life better for everyone on your team. Everyone knows what they need to bring to this and everyone benefits from it. And you can give that support without anyone needing to disclose in the first place. And that demonstrates that you care enough, that they feel safe enough to then disclose when they need to.
Vic, thank you. There is so much in there, so many top tips, and as you said, not just for people that have got neurodiversity, but also just for anybody. They're just good best practice. Thank you massively, and thank you to you all for today. Thank you, Catherine, Vic, and also Tom, for sharing your time, your knowledge, and your insight. So to summarise, as we're finding that more individuals are getting diagnosed, businesses that really do need to make sure that we're catering for both employees and also for our consumers. So for our audience that are listening, please do get in touch if you've got any questions or you want to find out a little bit more. Thank you to our audience for your time. We really hope that you've enjoyed today's pod. If you did, then please do subscribe and to us on Spotify or follow us on LinkedIn so that you don't miss out on any of the fantastic episodes. We've got more really good ones coming up soon as well. You'll also find some of the older episodes, which are absolutely excellent. So please do take a listen of those. And those are available on our channels too. So yes, please do take some time to have a look at that. Subscribe to our LinkedIn newsletter, and we will be able to bring you some monthly insight and horizon scanning to update you on the wider insurance industry. Thank you.